for a period of time, I worked at a manufacturing company. I lived in the manufacturing factory in the Zhejiang province, kind of middle of nowhere, a couple hours south of Shanghai. But I lived there with about 2,000 Chinese workers who didn't speak English. So that was a blast.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Sean Ireton with the Nuinspiration Extraordinary Gentlemen podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have my next guest on the show. His name is Krisnel Miraflor, and he is a gentleman that I met recently after having coffee with my last guest. Krisnel is a really cool guy, and I knew we were going to be good friends because we had such a great conversation. We hit it off. I learned that he works for the organization PHP Agency, which is People Helping People. And the CEO of that company is Patrick Bet-David. And you guys, if you're on LinkedIn a lot, you may have seen Patrick on there frequently. I know he comes up in my feed a lot. But anyway, Krisnel is a really cool guy. He's got some awesome stuff for us today. So what I wanted to do was start off with his origin story. And I wanted to tell you that he was born in a Christian family in LA and lived here till the age of 4. And then with his family, he moved to the Philippines, where they began their journey to assist impoverished communities. And then by the time he was 21, he visited a total of 13 countries. That's wild and crazy, and that's really cool. So, Krisnel, what were those 13 countries, actually? I want to get into that.
Oh, man. I mean, if you count USA, Mexico, Canada, South Africa, China, Hong Kong, Thailand, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Japan, London. I think it's around that. I might be missing a couple, but it's around around that.
That's crazy, man. That's awesome, though.
Thank you.
And after that, like during that time, for 2 years, he recruited, he trained, and he led thousands of students and churches in short-term mission trips to Mexicali, Mexico. He worked primarily with churches and orphanages and men's rehab centers, men's homeless shelters, and a men's prison in Mexicali. And then he began working at the PHP Agency. And for those of you who don't know, PHP is a financial services, marketing, life insurance, retirement planning, and annuities company. And the reason why I brought Krisnel on the show today is because he is an international business student. And since graduating, he's put his degree to use. He has real world experience using this degree. And, what we want to do is focus on how we can provide you guys, the listeners, some value here on how to properly work with Asian and Latino cultures. If you're unfamiliar with those customs or, other countries globally as well, just so that you get a really good handle on when you're doing business with countries outside the U.S., what's some good ways to handle those situations. So with all that said, I want to give the floor to Krisnel, and so he can describe his role at PHP and also expand on his origin story. So thank you for coming on, man.
Thank you, Sean. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's I love how we met, first of all, literally just outside Starbucks and just having a conversation. You're having a conversation with your guy. I'm having a conversation with someone I was with, and just being able to touch base on that. That definitely rings true to the my belief in connection in people, and my role and the reason that I'm with PHP Agency is because we have a desire to truly help people and to pour value into people, from the top of our government to lower income families, everyday families. People are going through financial struggles, and that's something that we realize. And people are being left behind, and we want to be able to walk alongside people, and teach them about finance, teach them about proper education of what is it that the wealthy do differently with their money than middle and lower income class families. And we want to be that voice. We want to be the heralder. We want to be the hands and feet of that message, going to families and people and saying, hey, how can we help you? How can we pour value into you? And just be able to walk alongside people. So I love everything that the company stands for: faith, family, business. Very focused on, truly being difference, not only the nation, but the entire world. We're expanding internationally right now, and it's super exciting. We're expanding into India and continuing to get endorsements by different public figures: Oscar De La Hoya, Magic Johnson, Wayne Gretzky, Mark Cuban. Several different entrepreneurs as well as public figures have endorsed our company, and man, it's been crazy. Just walking alongside these people and growing so much from this company. So yeah, just a little bit about my background. I mean, you touched base on most of that. Yeah, growing up in the States and in the Philippines to different socioeconomic conditions. I grew up in a place where I was very familiar with impoverished communities, with what Americans would see as, the poor people. Grew up in the Philippines every summer. Well, yeah, most of my childhood memories were there. I spent a lot of time there. And every single time that I was there, it wasn't uncommon for us to, wake up and see the living room flooded. That was just normal for us. We're swimming in the streets. We're swimming just to get from place to place. Water up to our waist and even higher sometimes. But that definitely opened my eyes to the importance of culture, people, and meeting people where they are rather than just seeing people as another buck or seeing people as just monetary value, but seeing people as the greatest currency, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally it does. Yeah.
But yeah, so throughout my journey, I've had crazy experiences. I had the opportunity to travel around Southeast Asia and, go to about 7 different countries. And one of them being Hong Kong. Hong Kong has a deep history of, attachment to China. But it's also a very special country because it is so attractive to foreigners. People from all over the world go to Hong Kong. While I'm in Hong Kong, I reached out to a man who he was a CEO of the Mekong Club, and it's a counter-trafficking organization. So, just going into my trip throughout Southeast Asia, something I knew about Southeast Asia was that human trafficking was a big thing there. You look at Thailand, Bangkok, it's pretty much the central hub of trafficking victims internationally. People are literally sent there from all over the world. But while I'm in Hong Kong, I met with a man named Matt Friedman. Fantastic guy, fantastic organization. And what this organization does is they're a counter-trafficking organization, and they target companies within primarily they target supply chain management. And something that I didn't know that he had revealed to me was about 60% of the labor force within supply chain management is forced labor. So people who, are taken from young age, originally for sex trafficking, they're exploited to, be used as forced labor during the day. And then at night, they would be sold as prostitutes. And that's something that really hit me really hard. I didn't realize that so many people around the world were going through that. That was just so foreign to me. And as we were having that conversation, he was talking about 27 million people are in trafficking today, but only 20,000 get rescued and restored.
Wow.
I don't know if I did my math right, but that's somewhere around 0.01%.
That's crazy.
Of people.
Wow.
Right. And man, it frustrates me. I was asking, Matt, like, how did you start getting into this? And this is a story I shared with you when we met. How did you get into this industry? He worked as a journalist for a good amount of time. And he, started to show interest in wanting to, rescue and restore women who were being enslaved internationally. And he told me the story. He told me a story about this one girl, one of the first people he ever interviewed. It was him and several other associates with him, and they're interviewing this woman. And he got permission from the pimp and the madam, the entire brothel, to interview this woman and tell her story. As she was sharing, he was asking her different questions. He asked her, how'd you get here? How did you get to this place? She came from a very rural village, very far from the city. And one day a man came to her town and, was looking for a wife, and promised wealth and fortune. And her family told her to go with him, do whatever it takes to send money back home, because that was the role of women in that culture. You're there so that you can send money home to your family, because upon birth, that's pretty much the identity upon birth. Females in the Chinese culture, in rural China, they're always told, families just always wanted a son to carry on their name, right? And so she was told this, and she was tricked by this man to go into the city. She's, blindfolded and taken to a brothel. Once she opened her eyes and they took blindfolds off, she didn't realize that there were men lined up in front of her. And what the madam did is they set it up so that a row of men would rape her to break down their spirits, so that they can be used to emotional extortion, essentially. And something that I found was, man, that just frustrated me. And he asked her, how many times had you been, I don't know if he asked her this, but she mentioned it. She mentioned that she'd been raped 6,000 times in her life.
Wow.
And she remembers each one. And what was frustrating was she couldn't do anything about it. They had her captive physically, and now they're going to control her emotionally because they'd broken down her spirits. Matt returns to ask and asks her, aren't you mad? Aren't you mad at these people that did this to you? Aren't you mad at the people who, blindfolded you, the men who raped you, the pimp and the madam for setting this up? And she looks at him and she says, no. I understand that they're evil people. I understand that they can do evil things. Who I'm mad at are the people like you. And she points at Matt and his associates. People like you who claim to be good, who claim to love people, but don't do anything about it. Every night, and she was saying this, every night I prayed to God, or whatever God was out there, to save me. But no one came. Nobody came. And here you are asking me these questions, thinking that you're doing the good thing. But no one came. That story hit me. That story made me realize that, talk is cheap. A lot of people say they want to change the world. A lot of people are more in love with the idea of changing the world than actually changing the world. A lot of people aren't willing to do what it takes to change the world. And man, that story hit me and it sits with me. And it's a story I'm going to continue to tell because people need to know the reality that women are facing. And that's just one woman. That's just one. There are 27 million. 27 million. That's a lot.
So now that's crazy. And that's such a powerful story. And it's insane to me that this is happening. Where can people go to? Like, what are some of the organizations that you follow or that you know of that you can put out there right now to tell people who want to engage in helping fight against this? Like, what are some organizations that are particularly helping with this scenario?
Yeah. Like I said, the Macon Club is one. It's not as well known, but it's growing. They just take a different route in fighting trafficking than the traditional going into brothels and rescuing women. They, audit corporations, they audit governments, and that's kind of their approach. And awesome organization, they do amazing things. So it's the Macon Club, MEKONG, Club. They're one organization, IJM, International Justice Mission. They do a lot of great work in India, Cambodia, the Philippines, in fighting trafficking. Fantastic. I personally worked with an organization called Eden Ministries, where they're a jewelry company that helps fight trafficking. Also, Nightlight, just small companies that are, their business model is focused on rescuing and restoring women in trafficking and helping them find employment afterwards and re-engage with society. So there are tons of different organizations out there. I would suggest and advise that people look into what's out there, because it's a topic that people don't talk about because it's not seen. But I've seen it. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, because we don't necessarily see it firsthand here in the States, but are there cases where women are being trafficked from the U.S.
Absolutely.
to these other countries? Like, where does it happen?
Not a lot of people know this, but the Super Bowl is actually one of the biggest events where human trafficking happens. I know there are districts all over the nation that are known for their trafficking, and they continue to move. People are aware of this. The pimps and madams, they're very aware of this. It happens all over the States. I've personally met several people who used to be, trafficked by these different brothels. I've met several of them in my life and have been, blessed to hear their testimony about how they've come from that and how they've been restored from that. But it happens all over. You just don't see it.
That's crazy, man. What can people look out for? Like, what are some signs that people can notice if they're at a bigger sporting event like that, or something so that they can be a member of society doing something to stop it?
Yeah. A lot of it is the way that women are, man, I mean, this goes into a huge topic of the way that women are treated, or the way that women are seen at sporting events. Sometimes they'll, just go up to men and ask if they want services, right? Sometimes they'll be stationed at a place and people who are looking for it know what to look out for. There's a lot of control with men watching over the women. So oftentimes if a woman is being extorted, if a woman is being trafficked, then there's usually a man checking to see, is someone going to take her away? Because the women are their assets for money, right? So they're not going to make sure that someone takes that away. So there's always eyes looking out. So some things to look out for are, guys always looking around and checking up on the status of women. Usually they'll be in just one spot, not really moving. In events like that, oftentimes, there's the women would be in just one area, one spot, checking around to see if someone's looking or watching, but also presenting themselves in a way where oh yeah, I can provide a service to you. So different things like that. That's why it's so hard to see, because it's literally hidden in plain sight with human behavior.
So they are providing prostitution services. They're not necessarily abducting women at the sporting event, right? It's just kind of...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't necessarily abduct women at a sporting event. It's more of, that becomes a hub for clients, for customers, in terms of quote unquote exporting women. That happens more internationally.
Got it.
Usually within Asia. And even when I was walking the streets of Thailand in the red light district in Bangkok, I saw women from Africa. I saw women from Russia, South America, Asia, different types of Asians, Middle East. Oh man, it hurts. but it really is a destination for human exploitation.
So that's a really distressing topic, and for the listeners out there who are tuning in on this and they want to do something about it, go to those sources that Krisnel mentioned. And if you feel like you want to do something about it, go to those sources. And can they donate? Do they volunteer? Like, how does that work?
You can donate. You can buy products to help fund, their causes, their education seminars. There are different ways to get involved. Internships, international internships, if you want to, really get into it and learn more about how you, whether as a business owner or just a, member of society, how you can do your part.
Right. Cool. So let's jump into that story about the man in the shack, and which is something that you actually experienced firsthand. This wasn't a secondhand experience, but let's jump into that, and then we can start talking about some of the things guys can do to be better in business in global cultures.
Yeah, so I lived in South Africa for several months, in the KwaZulu-Natal province, little town called Pietermaritzburg, and just beautiful country, right? I was there for a study abroad program with my university, and just had an amazing time. While I was there, it was part of the program to work with member of the church, and it was in a little township, like a small little town, not a very affluent area, not a very rich area, but still a place where poverty was all over the place. KwaZulu-Natal is the epicenter for HIV/AIDS in the world. Over 50% of the community suffered from HIV/AIDS, yet those who suffered were kind of outcasted and deemed as minorities. And I don't know if many people have heard of the term untouchables, but they were the people that were outcast from society. There was one day that me and several of their students, we were on the field. We had a list of names. We had on this paper a list of houses and names of people that we were supposed to talk to. And as we're traveling, as we're going to each house, we're almost done, right? Just one name, one house that needed to be checked. One more person we needed to visit. Super hot day, very exhausting. We're walking, and social workers that we were working with, they were, they didn't want to keep going, right? They didn't want to continue. They're just really tired, really thirsty, wanted to go home. There was something in me and my colleagues that, but we just felt like we needed to keep going. So we were in the area of where the last house would have been. We were in that area, and there was we couldn't find the house. It was between two houses, and none of them were the numbers. There was something in us that pointed to this little shack a little bit further down the road. We were like, what is that? We asked the social workers, and they said, that's probably like an outhouse, probably a little shed for tools and equipment. I was like, I don't know. I feel like someone's in there. Let's try there, right? So we go through this narrow pathway to get to that house, and we knock on the door. It creaks open, and in it we find a man just sitting on a stool, staring at the radio. It was not a very big space. It was probably an 8x8 shack, if anything, maybe 8x6. And he was just sitting there, skin and bones, staring at the radio, pretty much waiting to die. And we asked him, "Are you this person?" It was a name that we had on the list, and he said, "Yes, that is me." "Yes, what are you doing here? Like, where's your family? Like, is this your home?" And he's like, "Yeah, this is where I live." Several, days before, he had been stabbed by his neighbors. They were really mad at him. They think he stole something. They accused him of something. They stabbed him and left him for dead on the streets. And he was able to make his way back to his house, but he was just sitting there. And he had AIDS. And he had what he thought was medication, but actually turned out to just be potassium tablets. He thought he was taking the medication, so he was dying. You know, um, and yeah, this is a guy who'd been outcast from society, who had been, you know, stabbed by his neighbors, and who had lost so much. His family didn't care for him anymore. I believe he suffered from drug abuse at an early age, and kind of was left for dead by his family and neighbors. And what's crazy was, we were looking for him, and we could barely find him. How much harder would it have been for people around him to notice him, And something that really hit me was, as we were talking, we were just asking him a little bit about his life. And, the social workers that we were with told him, yeah, these are Americans who'd come from, the States to see how you are. And, we're here to see how you are. And he was overjoyed, man. And the smile on his face was ridiculous. Like, I'd never seen so much joy in someone. Because in his mind, here's what he's thinking. And this is what he expressed. Americans flew all the way from their country to come to my house. How crazy is that? Like, even his own neighbors didn't care for him. But Americans who had never met me flew all the way from their country to my country, walked down this dirt road, this narrow pathway to get to my home, just to ask how I am. And he said, because you guys have done this, it showed to me that I have hope in God again. That really hit me, because, I was struggling with these thoughts of, what is my purpose here? Like, I'm just going to leave soon. It's only like a short-term trip. Am I actually making an impact? But the power of presence, man, is something that, a lot of people take for granted. The power of being present with someone, being face-to-face, relationships, people, and that's something that, pushes me to continue to see value in people and continue to pour value into others.
Yeah. So what were some of your biggest challenges working in these different countries? Like when you were in Canada, when you were in Mexico, when you were in, the Philippines and all these other different countries, like what was one of the biggest challenges that you can remember that you had to overcome, and how did you overcome it?
I think the biggest challenges in working with different countries and working in different countries is realizing the differences between everybody. A country is, made up based on their values. If you look at every country's economic system, you'll notice that they're all different because they value different things. It's all about values. A lot of people think, oh yeah, they just speak a different language. They just speak, X, Y, Z, right? And they behave differently. But coming down to the why is it that they have a different economic system? Why do they have a different government system? Why do they have different principles? And it's all based on their values. What is it that they value? So I think the biggest struggle is determining what are the values of these people, and how can I personally adapt my condition to be able to appeal to that? Because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about the client. It's not about me, it's about the people that I'm serving. How can I best communicate to them that I'm here for them, rather than communicating to them, hey, I'm just going to be stuck in my American way. I'm just going to be stuck in my American business way and expect you to, want my services. Like, no, that's not how it's going to work. They need to see that you care about their culture, that you care about them, because otherwise that relationship is gone. Business is all about relationships. Each person you meet, every meaningful relationship you have has value greater than any monetary value that you could ever, receive. I mean, the main reason I wanted to be an international business major was because I saw value in culture. I saw value in different people. But also I wanted to understand more about how the world works, because business is the way the world works. People don't realize that. They think, oh, hospitals, churches, like they're all like their own industry. No, it's all a business. It's all a business. Everything is a business. And how can we incorporate that and understand the importance of cultural differences in business? See, what a lot of people don't realize is that you can't approach every single person the same. If I'm from, if I grew up in the United States and I'm doing business in China, for example, you can't approach it the same way. Like, you need to understand their culture, their values, the way that they do business. There's a big gap. There are big cultural barriers that a lot of business people from the United States wholeheartedly, they think, they're doing the right thing. But man, if they slip up, they can lose a client forever because maybe they said something wrong. They didn't introduce themselves properly. They didn't, there's some customs that we need to be aware of when dealing with international partners. So, yeah.
So what was one particular instance or occurrence where you had to make sure that you are benefiting both parties?
Mm-hmm. I'd say that the most difficult time to adapt was when I was in China. When I was in China, that was the most difficult, I guess, adaptation of my behavior to meet their needs. Chinese culture is so different from American culture. So for a period of time, I worked at a manufacturing company. I lived in the manufacturing factory in the Zhejiang province, kind of middle of nowhere, a couple hours south of Shanghai. But I lived there with about 2,000 Chinese workers who didn't speak English. So that was a blast. But in that, I found that I had to learn a lot of the key words in order to gain respect. I'm Filipino, right? I'm not white. Yeah, so they didn't, actually most of them didn't think that I was American. So that was really difficult because if they thought I was American, they'd automatically try to speak English, but then I look Asian, so they automatically spoke Chinese to me. So Mandarin, to be specific. But yeah, that was a struggle, but then I realized it's not about me. It's not about you trying to tell people, oh, I'm American. It's saying, how can I meet you where you're at? How can I communicate to you and tap into the values that you really look at, that you really appreciate? Tap into that for that proper communication and that proper benefit.
Right. So this segues into, I think that was valuable advice, actually, but segueing into the actual tips at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you properly show respect to those cultures and help everyone mutually benefit from a deal or proposition using elements of body language, voice tone, the spoken language? You spoke a little bit about, getting respect from them by knowing key phrases, key words, and things like that in their own native language. But what about body language? What about voice tone? What about other elements like that?
Yeah. So there's some things that are universal about human communication. One, smiling is great. We are attracted to smiles. So whether or not I know what I'm talking about, when I'm, trying to speak their language, keeping a smile on my face and laughing, like, it keeps that relationship strong. So, for example, let's say I'm meeting with a client who only speaks Chinese, right? Who only speaks Mandarin, and I try to say something in their language, and they know that I can't speak. But them seeing you trying forms that bond, forms that, trust, because they say, man, they're thinking, man, this person took the time to try to learn about my culture, and they're having a good time with it. Even if they messed up, even if they completely screwed up, and they tried, it shows me how much they care. And that's more valuable to me. In the Chinese culture, there's something called guanxi, and it's kind of like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And the way that business is done in China is often just through relationship. Things get done faster if you have a relationship with someone. So I'd say going for it, just taking that next step of it, being willing to embarrass yourself for the sake of that relationship. Because they see you mess up, you say something completely wrong because the tonation was wrong in the language, but you tried, they're going to laugh. They're going to have a good time.
So they have a pretty good idea, pretty good grasp. I mean, obviously, based on context, if you, because I know with like Mandarin and Cantonese and all that, there's all those different tones, and the wrong tone means the wrong word, or the right tone means the right word. So if you are trying to speak their language and you do the wrong tone, they're going to understand it in context, right? Whether how hard you're trying to speak with them, right?
Sometimes.
Yeah,
I'll say most of the time they will.
Okay,
There's sometimes I've tried to say something, I've completely butchered it, and they're just so confused. And if I said it a little bit different, they're like, "Oh, that's what you're saying." If I'm trying to say I love my mom, I probably said something like, "Oh, I need the toilet," or something like that.
That's funny.
They're confused. They're like, what? Because they think that you've learned the language.
Yeah.
And it all depends on where you're from. If I was in Shanghai, they'll understand that I'm not going to be as fluent. Sometimes if I'm a more rural area, because there are pretty much no expats there, there are no foreigners there, they'll think that I completely speak, so it's kind of different. It's weird how the more foreigners there are, the lighter they are about, conversation. In a place like Shanghai, whereas if I were in my manufacturing company and I was trying to speak to people, we'd still have a good time, but it's all about finding what they expect and meeting that expectation. And if you don't meet it, just go for it,
So moral to the story here is that, from what I'm gathering from this conversation, and jump in here too, Krisnel, when you feel like you want to contribute something, but basically the moral to the story here is that when you are trying to interact with a different culture, do some homework. Like before you go somewhere, at least kind of research what those countries' customs are, so you have a ground level foundational understanding of what their values are, how they communicate, things like that, so that when you go there, you're not completely ill-equipped, and that you'll earn their respect by the fact that you did some homework, that you tried to understand who they are as people, because as people, all we want, our natural innate need is to be loved, right? So no matter what country you're in, as long as you can show the fact that you are loving their culture in some way, or loving them as people, they will understand that. So whether they speak English or not, try to speak to them in their native tongue first. And if they do speak English, then you guys can probably have a conversation. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely. You got to do your homework. You got to do your research. You don't want to show up somewhere and not know a single thing about, their culture or the language. That they just won't respect you.
Yeah, right.
Just imagine if someone came to America and they didn't speak a lick of English. Like, most American businessmen will not recognize that or respect that.
Right.
Always put yourself in their shoes.
So it's essential to building rapport and building this a mutual respect for one another in business, whether you speak English or not, like whether you're doing business here in just America or if you're working globally, understanding that you need to build rapport in these simple ways. We often take this stuff for granted, and we forget how important respecting people within their own culture is. In America, we're used to it. We know that shaking hands, looking somebody in the eye, and smiling is a good thing. But in other countries, there's different things there. So in China, for example, what would be a custom there? So I know they shake hands in business environments, but is, for example, bowing something that you want to do, or is it going to make you look like a weird American tourist or something?
Yeah, don't bow.
Okay.
Don't bow. Don't bow in China. It's actually funny because a lot of times in America, business conversations happen over dinner, right? In China, they don't happen at dinner. Dinner is for relationship. Dinner is where you just eat together and you talk together and you laugh together. Business happens at KTV, the karaoke bar. The business conversations happen around the alcohol, and that's where all the negotiations happen. When you're singing, it's crazy, so different, so different.
That's super fascinating, because I know that at my last day job, there's a he's a guy he's Chinese descent, and he went to Korea, and in Korea you're supposed to pour drinks for other people. You don't pour your own drink.
No, same with China.
And it's like it's how old you are. I think it was like you pour the drinks for the elders. So there's subtle little nuances like that people need to brush up on and make sure that they're familiar with those things. And but to wrap things up here with where people can find you, so Facebook, LinkedIn, and your email address, how can people find you in those areas?
Absolutely. Facebook and LinkedIn. My name is Krisnel Miraflor, Krisnel. Miraflor, Miraflor. For my email is literally just krisnelmiraflor@gmail.com. That's my personal. I prefer personal. Just, let me know if you have any questions. If you ever want to talk about international business, different cultures, different customs to be aware of before going anywhere. Just dealing with relationships and international business in general. Yeah, just throw me some questions.
Yeah. And as we talked about before, he works for PHP, and he does finance and other financial needs for people and different assessments and things like that. So if you need some help in that area, definitely let him know, and I'm sure he can help you out there.
I would love to.
Yes. So I want to end the episode with this question. What is your image saying about you today?
To my image is saying it tells a story. My image takes someone who was bullied as a kid, who was picked on a lot, who didn't grow up with much confidence, who was insecure, who cared too much about what people thought, and has transformed it into someone of confidence, someone who can look at the world and not fear rejection, someone who can walk confidently, shoulders up, head high, just taking on the world, and each step by step, I've seen so much in my life. I've endured so much in my life. Yes, I'm young, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, there's more time, obviously, but I say my image is one that has developed and is telling a story about where I've come from to where I am now and to where I'm going to go.
Great. I love it. Awesome, man. So Krisnel Miraflor, thanks again once more time for coming on the show. And I want to acknowledge you for all the work that you've done, traveling to these different countries, helping these people out, being someone that is coming from the United States to countries like South Africa, and helping people, right? Like the core foundation of what PHP is all about, people helping people. And you are actually living that. You're serving people financially with all these different things. You've been to these other countries and helped people in their own circumstances to help, rebuild them back up, rehabilitate people, lead churches and students, and going into these different men's homeless shelters and men's prison, things like that. Like, just want to acknowledge you for that, and being such a really generous soul with your time and coming on the show and being somebody who can provide value to other people. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Sean. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely, man.
Appreciate you a ton. Yeah, it's been a blessing and honor to be here.
Cool.
And I truly appreciate you.
Thanks, man. Awesome. All right. Until the next one, take care, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Nuinspiration Extraordinary Gentlemen podcast. If you enjoyed the content, give it a like, subscribe, and if you know someone who needs to hear this or wants to hear this, share it with them. Don't hold back. Let them hear it. And if you have any questions for me or my guest, we'd love to answer those questions for you. So shoot me a tweet, DM me on Instagram, leave a comment below on YouTube, or find me on Facebook. If you have Anchor FM, you can message me on my station. The username is @Nuinspiration, NUINSPIRATION. Iration. And as always, make the rest of today extraordinary, gentlemen.